They found the teeth before they found the name. Scattered across cracked linoleum, the molars glinted beneath the neon hum of a corner store light in East Harlem. Blood had dried black by the time Detective Alvarez stepped inside. The smell wasn't just death, it was betrayal. No body. No weapon. Just 6 shell casings and the remnants of a man who once ran Murder Inc. from the shadows. They whispered about him. The ghost, never seen, never caught. His fingerprints were stories, not evidence. The girl behind the counter trembled, her voice barely rising above a whisper. He smiled before he shot him, she said. Then, silence. No surveillance. No suspect. Just a myth turned real with a trigger pull. But this wasn't random. This was a message. Something ancient had been stirred awake in the city's bones. And for the first time in years, the underworld felt afraid. A king had returned, or maybe a ghost never left. Before the blood, there was music. Benny Romano ran the jazz club like a cathedral, velvet drapes, whiskey sweat, and rules carved in silence. He wasn't just a made man. He was the conductor of chaos, wearing a silk tie and a smile. But tonight, the piano stayed closed. Benny stared at the empty stool where Frankie used to sit. His younger brother, his shadow. Frankie had a way with keys, Benny muttered, lighting a cigarette with trembling fingers. Outside, thunder echoed down 118th Street. Inside, the ghosts danced quietly. The bartender wiped down the counter twice as long, waiting for the questions Benny wasn't ready to ask. Who pulled the trigger? Who knew Frankie's route? Who got close enough to take out the bloodline? Benny closed his eyes. The storm outside was nothing compared to the war building in his chest. And for the first time in 20 years, Benny wasn't in control. The call came just after midnight. Officer Langford, half drunk on cheap bourbon and football reruns, was jolted into clarity by the dispatcher's voice. We've got a 1054 near East 118. Multiple teeth. No body. Teeth? Not a code he'd ever heard. As he grabbed his badge, he felt it. That pull. The same chill he felt before the Marcy Projects massacre in 9. Something wasn't right. When he pulled up to the scene, Alvarez was already there, silent, holding that silver tooth like it weighed more than evidence. Langford said, "What the hell happened here?" Alvarez didn't answer. He just nodded toward the store's entrance. Langford followed the trail of blood like a breadcrumb path into a nightmare. His boots stuck to the floor. Then he saw it, that word, painted in red. A warning? A promise? Maybe both. Either way, they'd need more than badges for what was coming. Benny lit another cigarette with the last one. He hadn't cried in 20 years. Not since his father died choking on a ribeye in front of 5 capos. But this hurt differently. Frankie wasn't just blood. He was his softness, his soul, his tether to anything human. You know who did this, the bartender finally said. Benny didn't answer. Couldn't. Because if he said the name, the city would burn. Frankie had a secret meeting last night, alone. No driver. No muscle. That wasn't like him. He said he had to make it right, Benny whispered. The storm hit the windows hard. The glass shivered. Outside, a figure watched the club from across the street, face hidden under a fedora, motionless as the city around him pulsed. Benny crushed the cigarette. He'd buried enemies. But burying family? That's when a man starts hearing ghosts. Frankie never made it home. His last steps were carved into the wet pavement like echoes of a sin. Security footage from 2 blocks down showed him walking fast, no umbrella, head down. He passed a payphone, paused, then turned. That's when the lights blinked. Static took over. Next frame, empty street. He vanished, Alvarez muttered, rewinding the footage for the 5th time. No gunman. No getaway car. Just gone. But on the screen's edge, barely visible, a single frame showed a reflection in the phone booth glass. A face. smiling. Cold. That's not possible, Langford said, recoiling. Because the man in the reflection? He died 6 years ago in Rikers. They buried him. They checked. But now? Now, he was back. And if ghosts had unfinished business, this one just declared war. Detective Alvarez stood in the cold morgue, fingers twitching as the drawer slid open. But there was no body. Only a wallet. Leather. Burned along the edges. Inside, a photo of Frankie and Benny, arm in arm in front of the jazz club, 20 years ago. Frankie's smile hadn't changed. But someone wanted to erase him. They didn't kill him, Alvarez whispered. They erased him. Langford leaned over, brows furrowed. That ain't possible. Alvarez shook his head. It wasn't about proof anymore. It was about patterns. All the old names were surfacing. One by one. Like old debts coming due. Murder Inc. wasn't just a rumor. It was a machine, buried under fake names and forgotten alliances. Someone had turned the engine back on. And Frankie? Frankie had gotten too close to the spark. The morgue was quiet, but it echoed. As if the room remembered every lie spoken inside it. Deep in Brooklyn, a door swung open in an old butcher shop with no name. Benny entered like a man walking into confession. Behind the counter stood Angelo, chops Marconi, apron stained with blood, eyes cold as marble. You're late, Chops said without looking up. Benny replied, You owe me answers. Chops chuckled. I owe no one, not anymore. But Benny wasn't playing games. They took Frankie. The blade in Chops' hand paused. Just for a breath. Then he cleaned it slowly, like ritual. Then you best start asking the old ghosts. Because the ones still living ain't talking. Benny leaned in. Was it him? Chops didn't blink. If it was, then the city's already burning. You just haven't smelled the smoke yet. Benny left without another word, but he knew what that meant. The past wasn't buried. It had teeth. Alvarez spent the night poring through cold case files, every folder a tombstone. And then he found it. A photo from 1997. Hi. Same smile. Same face. The man in the phone booth. Only back then, he went by Victor Sanz, informant turned assassin, presumed dead in a Rikers riot. Alvarez muttered, either the system lied, or he did. He dug deeper. Victor had ties to every known hit in the late 90s, including the one that made Benny a king. Frankie must have found something. Something that tied Victor's fake death to Benny's rise. Langford stepped in, saw the file. If this is real, every case from the last 20 years just cracked open. Alvarez nodded. And if Victor's alive, someone brought him back for a reason. But who? And why now? In the shadows, power was shifting. And the one pulling strings knew how to stay invisible. In a forgotten corner of Queens, a church bell rang at midnight. Benny knelt in a back pew, rosary tangled in his fingers. Not for prayer. For memory. Dao. A figure stepped from the confessional. Old, frail, cloaked in shadows. It's not your fault, the priest said, voice trembling. Benny didn't lift his head. But I made the calls. I pulled the strings. The priest replied, That ghost you saw, you made him. Benny's hands shook. Frankie wanted out. He wanted peace. And you couldn't let go. The priest said, stepping into the candlelight, a scar across his jaw, eyes cloudy with time. Now, the bloodline pays. Benny looked up. Tell me how to stop it. The priest whispered, You can't. You just choose who dies next. Benny wept, not for guilt, but because he knew the priest was right. The war had already begun. Langford returned to the precinct rooftop, chasing a signal that traced back to an encrypted burner. Static. Then a voice. Tell Benny. The dead don't forget. Langford froze. Who is this? Silence. Then laughter, low, broken, inhuman. Alvarez joined him, holding a police sketch of the man seen near the club. Langford compared it to the Rikers file. They match, but it's impossible, Alvarez said. Victor was cremated. Unless someone else wore his face, Langford replied. That's when the rooftop door creaked open. A package sat alone, no sender. Alvarez opened it. Inside, a photo of Benny dated 2 days from now, with a red X across his face. It's a hit list, Langford whispered. Or a prophecy, Alvarez said. Either way, someone had plans. And Benny was just the beginning. The hit came fast. A drive-by on 143rd and Lenox Stotts. 2 soldiers dead, one bleeding out on the hood of a Crown Vic. Benny arrived seconds after the last siren faded, stepping into a scene still echoing with gunfire ghosts. Blood pooled at his shoes. One of the bodies, Vito Carmine, had been with Benny since day one. A knife carved into Vito's neck read, "Balance." Not a name. A message. Benny didn't blink. He turned to his driver. Tell the rest, no one breathes without my say. Somewhere above, a camera clicked. Watching. Waiting. He knew this wasn't random. It was war strategy. Chop the lieutenants first, leave the boss paranoid. But Benny wasn't just a boss. He was a storm in a suit. And the streets had just tasted thunder. Someone was cashing in vendettas, and they weren't done yet. Alvarez reviewed surveillance from a liquor store across the street. Frame by frame, the car appeared. No plates. Black windows. And there, in the passenger seat, a face he'd seen in cold cases a decade old. That's Ray Salvo, he whispered. Supposed to be dead. Langford leaned in. No one staying buried. The database gave nothing. Ray's record ended in 8. No death cert. No grave. But someone had reassembled the old crew like Frankenstein's monsters, pieced together from ashes and lies. Alvarez stood up. We need to go deeper. Find the pattern. Langford asked, where do we start? Prison records, fake obits, off-grid properties. You think it's Victor again? No, Alvarez said. I think Victor's just the gun. Someone else is pulling the trigger. And in that moment, they realized this wasn't about revenge. It was resurrection. The warehouse on Kent Street hadn't seen life in years. Until tonight. Benny walked in alone. No muscle. Just rage. Crates lined the walls, dust dancing in his flashlight beam. Then a laugh echoed, high, thin, familiar. You always were dramatic, a voice said. From the shadows stepped Gianna Marino, Frankie's ex-I. Her hair shorter, her stare harder. You? Benny asked, voice like gravel. Gianna nodded. You made the call that got him killed. Benny stepped closer. He was my brother. He was my heart, she spat. And you treated him like a pawn. The room pulsed with history. I didn't kill Frankie, Benny said. But I think I know who did. Gianna looked away. Then why are we still standing here? Benny's silence was answer enough. They were both broken by the same man. And the only way out was together. Gianna opened a folder. Inside, photos, documents, and a list of names. I've been building this since the day they buried Victor, she said. They paid off coroners, switched records, burned bodies that weren't his. Benny scanned the files. Names he hadn't seen in years. Old enforcers, dirty cops, dead men who shouldn't still be breathing. He's rebuilding Murder Inc., she continued. Only, this time, from the shadows. No family, no flags. Just ghosts. Benny lit a cigarette. You think he wants me? He doesn't want you, Gianna replied. He wants your name. The legend. The fear. Benny exhaled slow. Then let him come for it. But he knew this wasn't a showdown. It was a reckoning. And to stop a ghost, you had to become one. That night, Benny walked alone to the docks. A man waited, lean, pale, with a scarred lip. "You brought the city to its knees once," the man said. "We can do it again." Benny shook his head. "You mistake ghosts for gods." The man smirked. "We're both." He tossed a photo. Langford's face circled. "Next one dies at dawn." Benny grabbed the man by the collar. "If you touch him, you die screaming." But the man laughed. "You don't give orders anymore. You survive. That's all you've got left." Benny let go. Walked away. The wind howled across the harbor. He knew then, this wasn't about control or crime. It was about legacy. And his was being rewritten without him. Unless he bled to ink the last chapter himself. Gianna's hand trembled as she pushed open the apartment door. The smell hit first. Gun oil, sweat, and something ancient. Inside was a shrine. Photos of Frankie, Benny, and Victor covered the walls, arranged like a constellation of revenge. Strings connected victims. Notes scrawled in red ink, read like poetry from a madman. "He's planning something big," she whispered. Alvarez scanned the room. "He's been watching us the whole time." On the table, a map of New York with marks across key locations, precincts, clubs, safe houses. "This isn't revenge," Alvarez said. "It's erasure." Langford pointed to a corner. "Is that a camera?" It was. Live feed. Streaming. One. Watching them, watch him. Alvarez covered it, heart pounding. "He wanted us to see this." Gianna's voice cracked. "He wanted us scared." And he had them. Right where he wanted. In the old subway tunnels beneath Chinatown, Benny moved like a shadow. Each footstep echoed through decades. This was where the first hits were made. Where Murder Inc. earned its name. He passed faded murals, broken turnstiles, and then he saw it. Victor. Alive. What? Pale as ash, suit pressed, eyes like glass. "You're dead," Benny said. Victor smiled. "I was forgotten. That's worse." "Why now?" Benny asked. Victor stepped forward. "Because legends don't fade, they rot. I gave you power, and you buried me." Benny's voice trembled. "I thought you were gone. I waited," Victor hissed, "for you to feel the fear I felt in that cell. And now, I own it." Victor held up a detonator. "One signal, and every name you ever touched goes up in smoke." Benny stared. "This isn't justice." Victor grinned. "It's theater." Gianna burst into the precinct basement, breathless. "He's going to blow the city's past off the map," she cried. Langford stared at the evidence board. "Every one of those targets, it's personal." Alvarez slammed a file shut. "He's erasing the ghosts. The ones who built the machine? They traced the locations, old clubhouses, corrupted precincts, even cemeteries where traitors were buried. He's not just destroying records," Alvarez said. "He's destroying memory." Gianna whispered, "That's how you kill a legend." The room fell silent. Then, Langford turned. Where would he go first? Gianna didn't hesitate. Where it all started, the jazz club. They grabbed their coats. The storm outside had worsened, but the real thunder waited in Harlem. And this time, there would be no backup. The jazz club stood silent, a relic drowning in the downpour. Benny entered alone. The piano sat like a coffin. Dust. Echoes. He approached the bar where Frankie once joked about old vinyl. A soft click echoed behind him. Victor stepped from the shadows. "Welcome home," he said. Benny didn't turn. "You never belonged here." Victor walked slowly, eyes scanning the place. "But I built this." Benny turned now. "You bled for it. Frankie died for it." Victor's face hardened. "And now you'll all be remembered as ghosts." He raised the detonator. Benny stepped forward. "One more step, and you lose the memory too." Victor paused. Benny's hand held something, Frankie's lighter. He tossed it to the liquor-soaked floor. "You want to burn it down?" Let's burn together. The air froze. One spark away from history turning to ash. Gianna crashed through the club doors soaked and screaming. No. Her voice broke through the silence just as Victor pressed the button. Nothing. A click. No boom. Benny grinned. You think I'd let you write the last line? Victor stared, confused. Gianna raised her gun. He rewired it. You're done. Victor dropped the detonator. You don't get it. I am the last chapter. Benny shook his head. No, you're the footnote. Gianna fired. One shot. Clean. Victor dropped. Silence took the room again. Benny knelt beside the piano. Laid Frankie's lighter on the keys. He played for peace, he said. Gianna nodded. Let's make sure he gets it. Outside, the rain finally stopped. Inside, the ghosts settled. But Benny knew peace didn't last. Only stories did. And his was far from over. The news called it a gang war flare-up. Another name in the paper. Another silence. But in the underground whispers churned. Victor was dead, yes, but the machine had restarted still ticked. Benny stood over Frankie's grave, alone. The tombstone read nothing fancy. Just brother, musician, loyal. Benny whispered, you were better than this world. A figure stepped from behind a tree. Chops. His hands in his coat. You sure he's the only ghost worth mourning? Benny didn't turn. You came to finish it? Chops shook his head. I came to warn you, Victor wasn't the end. He was the trigger. Benny finally looked at him. Then who's the bullet? Chops said nothing, but slipped a folder into Benny's pocket. You won't like what's inside. As he walked away, Benny opened it. Inside, photos of himself. Stamped with the word, Target. Langford stormed into Alvarez's office, folder in hand. They're coming after Benny. Someone put out a bounty. Alvarez scanned the intel. Offshore transfers, encrypted chatter, new players moving into old territories. Victor was just noise, he muttered. This is orchestration. Gianna arrived moments later, eyes hard. The new names popping up, they were kids when Murder Inc. fell. Now they want to wear the crown. Langford leaned against the wall. Benny's past made him a king. Now it's making him a target. Alvarez looked at the board again, saw a pattern. They're not just coming for Benny, they're coming for the myth. He pointed to a red pin on the board, Frankie's club. They want to make an example. And with that, they knew the final act wasn't vengeance. It was takeover. Benny met with Gianna in a shuttered speakeasy beneath 7th AV. The place smelled of memory and blood. You sure you're ready for this? She asked. Benny nodded. It ends tonight. No more shadows. He laid out a plan, every safe house, every rival contact, every rat, flushed into the open. Gianna studied it. You realize you're lighting a fuse. I'm tired of candles, he said. Let it burn. She leaned forward. What if we don't survive it? Benny looked her in the eyes. Then let the city remember who we were, not who they rewrote us to be. Above them, thunder cracked. The club shook. But neither flinched. Because what came next wasn't survival. It was sacrifice. At midnight, the club doors opened for the last time. Benny stood at the bar, tie loose, drink untouched. Outside, 3 black cars pulled up. One by one, men stepped out, young, hungry, untested. Their leader, Carlo Mendez. A name no one used until now. You were the king, Carlo said, stepping inside. Now you're just a rumor. Benny smirked. Rumors start wars. Carlo nodded to his men. Then this is history. Gianna emerged from behind the stage, gun in hand. Funny thing about history, it remembers who shot first. The room exploded in gunfire. Dust. Bang. Wood splinters. Shouts. In the chaos, Benny moved like a man with nothing left to lose. Because he didn't. He had one goal. erase the future these men wanted. And if he had to bleed to do it, so be it. The smoke cleared. Bodies on the floor. Blood soaking the wood. Benny sat against the piano, wounded, breathing shallow. Gianna knelt beside him, face streaked with ashen tears. "It's done," she whispered. Benny looked at the ceiling, coughing. "No. It just starts over. Different names, same war." "Then, why fight?" she asked. "Because Frankie believed we could change it," he said. "And someone has to try." Sirens wailed in the distance. Not NYPD feds. They'd be here soon. Gianna grabbed his hand. "We'll say it was all Victor." Benny chuckled, bitter. Let N chase ghosts. As she helped him stand, he looked at the club one last time. "This place used to play jazz." "It still does," she said. "Only now. It plays truth." 3 days later, the headline said it all. Club massacre leaves questions, not answers. No names. No truth. Just whispers. Benny lay in a private hospital room under an alias. No visitors. No phone. Just silence. He watched the rain bleed down the window, IV dripping slow like time itself. Gianna entered without a word. Hurt dripped, face unreadable. She handed him a small case. Inside, Frankie's sheet music. Untouched. "They missed this," she said. Benny touched the paper like it might burn him. "It's all that's left." She shook her head. "It's all that matters." The world outside thought Benny was dead. And maybe he was. But the ghost that walked away from Murder Inc. wasn't finished. Not yet. Not while the tune still lingered. Alvarez stood before Internal Affairs, the tape recorder spinning slowly between them. "You expect us to believe Victor Sanz was alive?" the man across the table asked. Alvarez stared, stone-faced. "You wanted closure, not truth." The man leaned forward. "Then tell me what really happened." Alvarez didn't blink. "A war. And we lost more than bodies. We lost the story." Silence fell. "So who pulled the trigger?" Alvarez stood up. "Wrong question." The tape clicked to a stop. "You should be asking who survived." As he walked out, he passed Langford in the hallway. "They're not gonna back you on this," Langford muttered. Alvarez replied, "Then I'll walk alone. But I won't lie." Outside, the city buzzed again, but something had changed. Truth didn't live in files. It lived in scars. Langford walked through the wreckage of the precinct basement. It had been torched. Files gone. Evidence erased. On the wall, someone had scrawled in soot, "Truth burns, you." He ran his fingers across the char. Everything they had, wiped. "It's happening again," he said aloud. Gianna appeared behind him, holding a flash drive. "Not everything," she said. "Frankie backed up everything before he died." Langford stared. He knew. She nodded. He saw it coming, he just didn't run fast enough. Together, they stared at the drive like it was sacred. Proof. 1-1G. Memory. Evidence. Langford tucked it inside his jacket. "We leak it." Gianna shook her head. "No, we bury it, until the city's ready." Because truth wasn't a bullet. It was a seed. And some soil had to rot before it grew. Benny sat in the back of an unmarked car, window rolled halfway down. The city passed in blurs. "You ready?" Gianna asked from the driver's seat. He didn't answer. Just stared. They stopped in front of a gray stone building. An orphanage. Children played behind the gates. "That's where we met," Benny said. "Me and Frankie." She turned to him. "You think they'll be safe now?" Benny smiled faintly. "Safer than we were." He handed her an envelope. Inside, every name, every contact, every piece of power he still held. "Burn it when I'm gone," he said. "No more kings, no more ghosts." She nodded, tears welling. As he stepped out, he didn't look back. Because some goodbyes aren't loud. Some just vanish into the wind and never return. Night fell. Gianna sat on the rooftop of her apartment, the city humming below like a sleeping beast. In her lap, the envelope Benny left. She struck a match, watched the flames eat the names. One by one. No kings. No ghosts. Just ash. She pulled out Frankie's sheet music, unfolded it gently. Then from a small speaker, a jazz track played, his last recording. Raw.wah. Imperfect.wah. Human.wah. Her eyes closed. She didn't need war anymore. Not tonight. Across the skyline, a billboard flickered. An ad for a new mayoral candidate, one of Victor's protégés. Still, she smiled. Let N chase shadows, she whispered. The fire burned low, but she didn't move. Because some wars don't end in gunfire. They end in silence. And in the silence, you decide who you become next. 2 weeks later, a man walked into a funeral wearing the same suit he'd nearly died in. Benny Romano. Alive, unseen, untouchable. The service was for a retired judge, someone who once signed off on Victor's fake death certificate. Gianna stood near the back, dark veil over her face. Benny didn't look at her, but he knew she was there. The room was filled with suits, lies, and ghosts. Benny sat in the third row, no name on the guest list, no trace on the record. As the priest spoke, Benny whispered to himself, "They bury secrets too shallow." Outside, the rain returned. As if the city itself couldn't mourn properly. Benny lit a cigarette beneath the church awning, and somewhere, someone else was pulling strings now. But for the moment, he'd vanished. Not dead. Not gone. Just elsewhere. Inside a vault in Midtown, Gianna opened a safety deposit box. No money. No gold. Just a single cassette tape and a letter marked, "For the next ghost." She slid the tape into a portable player. Static. Hi. Then Benny's voice. "If you're hearing this, then the story isn't over. It never was. It just moves. Host to host." The letter detailed how Murder Inc. was never one man or even one family. It was a system, fueled by silence, built on debt. "If you want to kill it," Benny said, "you have to starve it." Gianna stared at the tape player, silent. "This ain't your burden," Benny's voice ended. "But it might be your chance." She put the tape back, closed the box. Some truths don't need to be spoken. Some are just carried. Langford stood on the rooftop of the precinct, morning sun rising over the skyline. He held the flash drive in one hand, Frankie's name written on it in Sharpie. He'd replayed the recordings a dozen times, Frankie's warnings, his confessions. It wasn't just history. It was a manual for dismantling everything. "You think it's time?" Alvarez asked, stepping beside him. Langford shook his head. "Truth is a slow burn. You light it too fast, it burns everything." Alvarez offered a lighter. Langford looked at it, smiled faintly, and pocketed the drive instead. "Not yet," he said. "But someday." They watched the city wake beneath them. Honking horns, flashing lights, the hum of survival. Somewhere below, the system healed. Or pretended to. But the fuse had been lit. Just not by them. Benny walked the Coney Island boardwalk just before dawn, wind pulling at his coat. No one recognized him. Just another face, in a world too busy to remember. He watched the ocean breathe against the shore. Steady, endless. In his pocket, a photo of him and Frankie, folded from years of memory. He didn't cry. He'd already emptied that well. A boy on a bike passed him, radio blasting old jazz. Benny smiled. Music still lived. Even if the player was gone. He reached the end of the boardwalk, looked back once. "No more ghosts," he whispered. He dropped the photo into the sea. Let the tide carry it. Not out of grief. Out of release. Because the hardest part of surviving isn't the blood. It's knowing when to stop carrying the dead. A bar in the Bronx. New bartender. New faces. Same shadows. On the wall, a framed article, "The Last Days of Murder Inc." signed. Dust covered. Faded. But still there. A man sat alone in the corner booth, back to the door, hat low. The waitress didn't ask questions. She just poured bourbon. He lifted the glass. Scar on his hand caught the light. Same scar Benny had. But was it him? Or just a story now? No one knew. And maybe that was the point. The myth lived on, somewhere between fear and memory. And as the bar lights dimmed, a jazz song played from the jukebox. Not loud, but clear. "There's no retirement plan for ghosts," the waitress said, mostly to herself. And somewhere in the shadows, the man smiled.